You know the feeling, right? You're drowning in a sea of projects that seem totally disconnected, kind of random, and if we're being honest, sometimes pointless. One minute you're on a top priority task, and the next you're pulled onto something completely different. It's just chaos. But what if there was a system? A really clear roadmap that connects what you do every day directly to the company's biggest goals. Well, that's what we're going to talk about. How to get from that chaos to total clarity.
So first things first, we've got to diagnose the problem. How can you even tell if your organization's projects have gone rogue and are totally disconnected from any real strategy?
I am willing to bet that this question hits home for a lot of you. It's that sinking feeling, that all your hard work might not actually matter in the grand scheme of things. And look, this isn't just you feeling frustrated, it's a huge red flag, a symptom of a much bigger problem inside the organization. What's really fascinating here is how all these things feed into each other and create this vicious cycle. See, when the strategy is fuzzy, people start fighting over resources. Priorities change every other day. Nobody really knows what's important anymore. And that leads to everyone being stretched way too thin, multitasking on a million different things, and feeling like they're just spinning their wheels. It is a perfect recipe for burnout and getting absolutely nothing done.
Well, this chaos actually has a name. It's called the implementation gap. It's this giant chasm between the brilliant strategy that gets cooked up in the boardroom and what people are actually working on day to day. There was one study of Fortune 500 execs that found only about a quarter of them, just 25%, believed there was a strong link between their strategy and how it was actually being implemented. That is a massive disconnect. And this quote right here, it perfectly explains one of the biggest reasons for that gap. Plain old organizational politics. A sacred cow is that project that exists not because it makes any strategic sense, but because some powerful exec wants it. It's their pet project, and you better believe it's going to get money and people, whether it deserves them or not. And these sacred cows and political turf wars, they can have absolutely devastating consequences. I mean, just look at Xerox. Back in the 70s, they basically invented the personal computer. The Alto had a mouse, a laser printer, a graphical interface. It was years ahead of its time. But they completely squandered this unbelievable lead because of internal politics and because the project didn't have a strong sponsor to fight for it. So the takeaway is huge. A lack of strategic alignment isn't just annoying. It can literally sink brilliant, world-changing ideas. Okay, so if a lack of strategy is the disease, what's the cure? Let's get back to basics for a second and just define what we really mean by corporate strategy. This is probably the clearest definition you're ever going to find. Strategic management is basically the company's North Star. It's a journey in 3 parts. First, you take a good hard look in the mirror. What are we right now? Second, you dream big about the future. What do we want to become? And third, and this is the most important part, you build the actual plan. How are we going to get there? And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? A beautiful, inspiring vision is totally useless without a practical, real-world strategy to make it happen. If you don't have that, it's just a daydream. So how do we build that bridge? How do we actually close that implementation gap and turn a big, fancy strategy into things people are actually doing? Okay, I know this flowchart might look a little complicated at first glance, but just stick with me. It shows the whole journey from the very top to the very bottom. It's this logical flow that starts with the company's big mission, breaks it down into strategy and objectives, and then connects it all the way down to the individual projects that bring that whole vision to life. This thing right here, this is the engine that turns big ideas into real results. In fact, we can boil that whole diagram down to 4 key steps. First, you define your mission, your whole reason for being. From that, you formulate your strategy. Then, to make that strategy real, you set very specific objectives. And finally, how do you hit those objectives? Through projects. See, each step just flows right into the next one. It's a cascade. So, what separates a good objective from a bad one? Well, it has to be SMART. Now, this is a classic, and for good reason. Your goal can't be vague. It has to be specific. You've got to be able to track your progress, so it has to be measurable. Somebody has to be in charge of it, so it's assignable. It needs to be something you can actually achieve, so it must be realistic. And, of course, it needs a deadline, which makes it time-related. This whole framework is what turns fuzzy wishes into concrete targets. All right, we've got our strategy, we've got our SMART objectives. Now we get to the million-dollar question. You've got dozens of potential projects you could do. How in the world do you pick the right ones? Okay, so the very first thing we need to understand is that not all projects are created equal.
You really can't compare apples and oranges here. Projects serve totally different purposes, and they usually fall into one of three main buckets. The first type is compliance. These are your must-do projects. They're often required by law or maybe to deal with an emergency. You basically don't have a choice. The second is operational. These are all about making the business run better, faster, or cheaper. And the third type, which is often the most exciting, is strategic. These are the big swings, the projects that directly support that long-term vision, like creating a brand new product that could define the future of the company. And this question right here brings us to the core challenge. Let's imagine you only have the budget for one big project this year. Do you put your money into an operational project that's going to save you money next quarter? Or do you invest in a strategic one that could create a whole new market 5 years from now? How do you make that call without just guessing? The answer is a tool like this, the multi-weighted scoring model. Now, I know it might just look like a spreadsheet, but this thing is a powerhouse. It's how you strip emotion, politics, and those sacred cows out of the decision. Instead of relying on gut feelings or whoever yells the loudest in the meeting, you score every project against a set of criteria that you've decided are strategically important to the business. So let's zoom in on Project 5 to see how this works. See how strategic fit has a weight of 3? Well, Project 5 gets a perfect 10 in that category. So 3 times 10 is 30 points right there. It also scores a 9 on ROI, which is also weighted at 3, so that adds another 27 points. When you add it all up, Project 5 comes out on top with a score of 102. It's the clear winner. And the beautiful thing is, this isn't somebody's opinion. It's a data-driven choice tied directly to the strategy. And hey, if you're thinking this is just some textbook theory, think again. When Frontier Airlines filed for bankruptcy, they were in full-blown crisis mode. They had hundreds of IT projects going on and nowhere near enough money or people. So what did they do? They used a weighted scoring system just like this one to ruthlessly slash their portfolio down to fewer than 30 projects, the only ones that would actually help them survive. It really works. Okay, last piece of the puzzle. Once a project gets the green light, how do you make sure it stays on track and is still a good idea 6 months down the road? Well, you make it run the phase gate gauntlet. I want you to think of a project's life as a series of stages. And between each of those stages, there's a gate. That gate is a formal review, a serious decision point. A project doesn't just get to move on to the next phase automatically. No, it has to earn its way through that gate. This forces you to constantly ask, is this project still a worthwhile investment? And at every single one of those gates, there are only 3 possible outcomes. It's either a go, the project is looking good and gets to continue. It's a kill, the project is no longer making sense and you cancel it before it wastes any more money or time. Or it's a recycle. The project needs some work, so you send it back to be revised and resubmitted. This system builds in so much discipline and gives you logical off-ramps for projects that are starting to fail. So as we wrap this all up, I want to leave you with one final question to think about. When you look at the projects happening in your own organization, what do you see? Is it a random collection of sacred cows, or is it a focused, intentional portfolio of projects that are all pulling in the same direction, driving a clear strategy? The answer to that question will tell you almost everything you need to know about your company's chances for success.